There is a specific vulnerability that belongs to the motel room. Not the hotel, the motel. The distinction matters more than most people consider when they are pulling off a highway at 11 p.m. with 100 miles behind them and another 100 ahead. A hotel has a lobby and a concierge and the ambient security of a staffed, monitored, multi-story building where the architecture itself communicates that someone is watching, that the building has eyes, that you are held inside a system of attention whether you want to be or not. A motel has a parking lot. A row of numbered doors facing the outside world with nothing between them and it. A night clerk behind a window who may or may not be awake and who, in any case, is behind glass rather than between you and whatever the parking lot holds after midnight. When you close the motel room door and engage the deadbolt and lie down in a bed that has been slept in by strangers for 20 or 30 or 40 years, you are essentially alone. The door between you and the outside world is the primary separation. That door has been opened by hundreds of keys over the years, many of which were never returned when guests checked out, lost in coat pockets, forgotten in bags, carried away to other cities and other lives while the room they once opened continued to be occupied by new strangers who had no idea how many copies of their door's key were in circulation across the country. The room itself has held everything. Every kind of person, every kind of night. The good nights and the terrible ones. The people who were just passing through and the people who had nowhere else to go. The people who left quietly in the morning and the people who did not leave at all. A woman driving alone through rural Nevada checked into a roadside motel at 11 p.m. and woke at 3 a.m. to find that someone had been in her room while she slept. Not a break-in, nothing was taken. But things had been moved with a specific, deliberate care that is more disturbing than theft. Her keys, placed on the table by the door, were on the bed's nightstand. Her shoes, left by the door, were aligned side by side beneath the window facing the parking lot. Her phone, charging beside the bed where she had left it face up, had been turned face down. A couple on a road trip through Central Texas checked into a motel and found, behind the headboard of the room's double bed, a series of dates scratched into the drywall. Over 200 dates, spanning 40 years, some with names beside them, some with a single word, some with two. They looked up the motel's address in the following day's light. The property had appeared in news coverage twice in 4 decades. Both incidents were disappearance cases. Both were unsolved. And the last one. A man who checked into a motel in rural Mississippi on a Thursday night woke at 2 a.m. to the specific sound of the room's second bed responding to wait. Not a creak of the building. Not settling. The unmistakable compression and adjustment of a bed spring system receiving a person. He turned on the light. The second bed's comforter was depressed in the shape of a human form. The pillow was indented. The breathing that filled the silence when he turned the lamp back off was even and unhurried and belonged to someone who was entirely comfortable in that room. No one was there. 8 motel rooms. 8 nights behind thin walls and hollow corridors in rooms that have absorbed more history than their surfaces suggest. 8 accounts from people who discovered, in varying ways and at varying hours, that checked out does not mean empty. The room was already occupied. It had been occupied for a long time. The room was 114. The motel was a 22-unit roadside property on Highway 93 in central Nevada, and Laura had been driving for 9 hours when she pulled in at 11:08 p.m. on a Thursday in late September. She was 36, an independent marketing consultant based in Salt Lake City, and the drive between her home and her clients' offices in Las Vegas was one she made 6 times a year. She knew the highway. She knew the specific rhythm of this particular stretch. The way the desert opened up past the state line and the road went straight for distances that made the horizon feel like a wall you were never going to reach. She knew where to stop, where the food was acceptable, where the beds were clean. This motel was the logical midpoint. She had stayed here twice before without incident. It was clean, priced reasonably, staffed by people who understood that the guests arriving at 11 p.m. had been driving for a long time and wanted their keys and their room number and nothing else. The night clerk was a young man who gave her exactly that. Room 114, ground floor, second from the end, close to where she had parked her car. She carried her overnight bag herself. She traveled light, the efficiency of someone who had made this trip often enough to reduce it to its essential components. She let herself into the room, engaged the deadbolt, flipped the security chain, assessed the space with the practiced 2-second scan of a frequent traveler. Bed appeared clean, bathroom functional, no obvious issues, the particular smell of industrial cleaning products over old carpet that she had long since stopped noticing. She plugged her phone into the charger she kept in the outside pocket of her bag, placed it on the nightstand face up with the charging cable to the right, the same configuration she used in every hotel room she had stayed in for 11 years, a habit so deeply automatic that she performed it the way she performed breathing. She took off her shoes and placed them by the door, left then right, toes pointing out toward the room, the habit of someone who had been told once by a fire safety trainer that shoes by the door meant you could find them in the dark. She put her keys on the small table beside the door. She was asleep by 11:30. She woke at 3:10 a.m. without a clear precipitating cause. Not a sound, not a dream, not any of the usual mechanisms of waking in a strange room. The specific, sourceless waking that a body in an unfamiliar environment sometimes produces. The light sleep cycle interrupted by a registration of something just outside the threshold of conscious awareness. She lay still for a moment in the dark and let her mind collect itself. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. Her hand found the nightstand surface and found it empty where the phone should have been. She reached for the lamp and turned it on. Her phone was on the nightstand, but it was face down. And the charging cable, which she had placed to the right, was to the left. She had not done this. She had placed the phone face up and the cable to the right as she had done in hundreds of rooms, and now the phone was face down and the cable was to the left. She sat up and looked at the door. Her shoes were not by the door. She found them beneath the window on the far wall, the window that faced the parking lot. They were aligned side by side, toes pointing toward the bed. Toward her. Placed, not kicked. The specific alignment of someone who had set them there with intention. She looked at the table by the door. Her keys were not on the table by the door. They were on the nightstand, on the side she had just reached toward in the darkness, in the exact position that her hand would have found them if she had needed to find them quickly in the dark. Within arm's reach of the bed. Positioned, she understood as she looked at them, by someone who had thought about what she would need if she needed to leave the room quickly. She sat on the edge of the bed in the lamplight and she went through every available explanation with the systematic honesty of someone who has decided that self-deception is worse than the truth. She had moved her own things in her sleep. She had never sleepwalked in her life and had no history suggesting she might, and 11 years of hotel rooms had never produced a displaced item. She had placed her things differently than she remembered. She had done it in 9-hour drive exhaustion and her memory of the placement was false. She had the specific physical, kinetic memory of placing each item. The phone set down face up, the cable arranged to the right, the shoes positioned by the door, the keys set on the table. The memory was not vague. It was precise. Someone had been in the room. She turned on every light. Bathroom, closet, the overhead she never used. She checked under the bed, behind the shower curtain, inside the closet. The room held nothing that should not have been there. The window was locked. She crossed to it and tested the latch and found it fully engaged, the seal around the frame undisturbed, no evidence that it had been opened from outside. The deadbolt's interior indicator showed locked. The chain was engaged, clearly visible from the bed. Every point of entry locked. Nothing taken. Nothing disturbed except for 3 specific items moved to specific, considered positions. She sat with this for 20 minutes. She did not call the front desk. She understood, sitting in that room with every light on, that whatever she reported to the front desk could be explained by the explanations she had already applied and rejected. She had no evidence of intrusion. She had the arrangement. She checked out at 4 a.m. She drove 4 hours without stopping, past the logical next rest point, past a motel she had used before, until she reached a large truck stop with fluorescent lighting and open seating and the ambient noise of other people, and ordered coffee and sat in it until 7 a.m. when she felt like the world had returned to its normal dimensions. She has thought about the arrangement for 3 years with a consistency that suggests she has not finished understanding it. Not the presence, she has accepted the presence because the presence is the easier thing to accept. What she returns to is the arrangement itself. The specific choices. Keys within reach of the sleeping hand. Shoes facing the bed, oriented for quick use. Phone face down, screen dark, not a light source that would disrupt sleep. The arrangement of someone who was taking care of her. Who had been in that room while she slept and had looked at the way she had placed her things and had rearranged them for her benefit. Who knew, from looking at her while she slept, what she would need. She finds this more disturbing than anything a more obviously threatening presence would have been. Because threat she could categorize. This she cannot. Whatever was in room 114 on Highway 93 in central Nevada had no hostile intention she can identify. It had something more intimate than hostility. It had attention. It had looked at her closely enough in the dark while she slept to understand what she needed. She has not stayed at that motel again. She takes a different route now when she makes the drive. Longer by 40 minutes. She does not explain the change to anyone who asks. The dates behind the headboard were not something Kyle and Jess had been looking for. They were something Kyle found when the headboard's wall mounting separated on the second morning and he pushed the bed forward to examine whether the hardware was fixable or whether he needed to tell the front desk. They were 28 and 26, graduate students at a Texas university making a cross-country trip that was partly vacation and partly field research for the environmental studies thesis Jess was writing about land use patterns in the American Southwest. They were budgeting carefully. The trip was being done on graduate student funding and the careful accounting of two people who understood that the experiences were worth more than the comfort of the accommodation. The motel in Central Texas was 2 nights, a planned stop that allowed Jess to visit a specific stretch of the Chihuahuan Desert that she needed to document. The motel was a single-story, 16-unit property on a state highway that connected 2 towns neither of them had heard of before the trip. It was the kind of motel that existed because people needed to sleep between those 2 towns and there was nowhere else to sleep. The room was functional. The bed was acceptable. The television worked. The water pressure in the shower was better than expected. The wall behind the headboard was the specific institutional off-white of a motel room that has not been repainted in approximately 10 years, the paint applied over previous paint in the accretion that old rooms develop. Layer on layer, each coat covering the history of the one beneath it. When Kyle pushed the bed forward and got behind the headboard to look at the mounting hardware, he found the section of wall that the headboard had been covering for however long the headboard had been in its current position. He called Jess over without explaining why. The marks covered the full area that the headboard had concealed, approximately 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall. A rectangle of drywall that had been protected from every repaint by the headboard's position. Scratched into the original drywall surface. Not written, scratched with something hard and thin, the marks made by sustained pressure rather than a single pass, the lines gone deep enough into the drywall that they would have survived any surface paint anyway. Dates. Consistent in their format. Month, day, year, written in the numerical shorthand of someone working quickly or working in the dark. Small, deliberate, the sizing consistent enough across all of them to suggest the same hand or the same careful effort. Kyle started counting. He reached 100 and stopped and looked at Jess and she said keep going. He reached 217 before he was confident he had counted everything. They spanned from 1981 to the current year. 40 plus years of dates, accumulated in the concealed space behind a headboard in a room on a Texas state highway. Some dates had additional marks. A first name beside them, in most cases, single names only written with the same scratching tool as the dates. Some had one word, alone. The word appeared 11 times across the full collection, always written slightly smaller than the dates themselves, as if the word required less space because it was already understood. Some had 2 words, never left. Disappeared 4 times. Some had nothing, just the date, scratched with the same care as all the others, standing alone without annotation. They photographed everything. Kyle used his phone camera at multiple angles to capture the full extent of the marks and the detail of the individual entries. They moved the bed back. They finished their 2 nights. Jess had her field work to complete and neither of them was willing to admit, in the room, how much the wall behind the headboard had affected them, and drove out and spent the following afternoon in the county library in the nearest town with reliable internet and a printer. The motel's address had appeared in regional news coverage twice in 4 decades. The first time was in 1987. A woman had been reported missing after checking into the motel on a Friday night and failing to check out on Saturday morning. Her car was in the parking lot. Her overnight bag was in the room, her belongings undisturbed. There was no sign of disturbance in the room. There was no sign of her. The investigation had run for several months and produced no arrest and no body and no resolution. The case was technically open and practically cold. The second time was in 2003. A man had checked into the motel on a Tuesday evening, paid for 2 nights, and had not been seen by any staff member after check-in. His car remained in the parking lot for 3 days before anyone flagged it. His belongings were in the room. He was not. Same pattern as 1987, car, belongings, absence, no explanation. 2 disappearances, 16 years apart. Same property. Both unsolved. The motel still operating, still listed on travel sites, still receiving reviews from people who had slept through their nights without finding anything. Kyle and Jess sat in the library and looked at the photographs of the dates on the wall and looked at the dates of the 1987 and 2003 coverage and they cross-referenced. Among the 217 scratch dates, in a cluster near the headboard's upper left, there were 2 dates corresponding to the weeks of both disappearances. Close enough to the documented dates to be the same nights or the nights immediately following. The 1987 date had a first name beside it. A woman's name. The 2003 date had 2 words, never left. They reported it to the county sheriff's department. A deputy came out to the motel, examined the wall, photographed the marks, filed a report. He told them the cases were old and technically closed and that the marks on the wall were not evidence of a crime on their own because the marks could have been made by anyone at any time. Kyle asked who had made them. If not the people who disappeared, then who had been sitting in this room behind a headboard, scratching 217 dates into a wall over 4 decades. The deputy looked at the wall for a long moment. His expression was the expression of a man who has formed an opinion and is deciding whether the opinion serves anyone if it is shared. He said, "I don't know." He said it flatly. Final. As if the not knowing was a decision rather than an absence. The report was filed. Kyle and Jess drove on. The motel continued to receive guests and reviews. Jess has the photographs. She has shown them to a forensic anthropologist she knows through her graduate program. A woman who works with physical evidence of human presence and who approached the photographs with the professional attention of someone who reads marks as text. The anthropologist was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Someone spent a great deal of time in that room." Kyle said, "Do you mean the people who disappeared?" She said, "I mean whoever made these marks. Whoever was in that room, in the space behind that headboard, and scratched 217 dates into the wall over the course of 4 decades. That is not the work of 1 night or 10 nights. That is a sustained presence over a very long time." She looked at the photographs on her screen. The dates go back to 1981. Whatever was keeping this record started keeping it 40 years ago and didn't stop. She paused. "The last date in the sequence, you said it was this year?" Jess said yes. The most recent date was from a month before their stay. The anthropologist looked at the photographs for a moment longer. Then she said, "Someone was in that room last month." The sound from the second bed woke Thomas at 2:07 a.m., and the fact that he knows the exact time is because he looked at his phone the moment he heard it, before he had fully processed what the sound was or what it meant. The orienting reflex of a person startled from sleep. Locate yourself in time before anything else. He was 44, a sales representative for a medical equipment company based in Memphis, and the drive between his home territory and his client in Jackson, Mississippi was one he made monthly. He had a preferred motel in Jackson but had missed his usual exit after a long day that had run long and ended in a conversation with a client that extended past dinner, and he had pulled off at the first motel he saw with a vacancy sign and gotten a room and been grateful to be horizontal. The room had 2 beds. He always took the one nearest the door in double occupancy rooms, a habit from years of travel, the reasoning behind it long since forgotten but the habit retained. He had put his phone on the nightstand, taken off his shoes, lain down on top of the comforter in his clothes, and been asleep in approximately 12 minutes. The sound was specific. He registered its specificity before he was fully awake. The distinction between the ambient sounds of a motel at night, which he had been sleeping through for years, and this. Not the building settling. Not the shared wall noise of the adjacent room. The specific, mechanical, intimate sound of a bed spring system receiving weight. The series of compressions and redistributions that a mattress and its underlying springs produce when a person lies down in it, or shifts position in it during sleep. A sequence of sounds with a particular rhythm and duration that any person who has shared a bed would recognize immediately. He had shared a bed with his wife for 17 years. He knew this sound the way you know the sound of your own name. He turned on the nightstand lamp. The second bed's comforter was compressed. Not uniformly, not the flat depression that air pressure or a structural mattress issue might produce. The specific, topographic compression of weight distributed across a human body. A deeper depression where a torso would rest, shallower toward the foot of the bed where the legs extended. A clear indentation in the pillow at the position where a head would rest in a neutral, face-up sleeping position. The specific relationship of these compressions to each other, proportional, anatomically consistent, that together composed the shape of a person lying on their back with their arms at their sides. No person. He sat in the lamplight and he looked at the second bed and he worked through the explanations with the specific, urgent focus of someone who needs an explanation and is willing to accept an imperfect one if it holds. The heating system had pushed air in a directed flow across the bed. The vent was on the wall opposite the beds. He could see it from where he was sitting. Air from a vent does not create a human-shaped depression with anatomically proportional relationships between the torso and head compressions. The mattress itself had a structural irregularity that produced this pattern under certain temperature conditions. Mattress irregularities are uniform or random. This pattern was neither. He had been in that bed and had moved to this one in his sleep without knowing. He had not been in that bed. He had gotten into the near bed and the evidence of his own sheets confirmed he had not moved significantly. He looked at the second bed for a long time. Then he turned off the lamp. In the dark, with his eyes adjusting to the ambient light filtering through the curtains, the shape in the second bed's comforter was still visible. The depression was still there. He looked at it and he listened to the room. Breathing. Very faint. At the precise threshold between audible and not audible, the range that requires absolute silence to detect and that a mind in a noisy environment would never find. Even, slow, the unhurried rhythm of a person in untroubled sleep. Comfortable. Unaware of him or indifferent to him. Simply present in the room in the way that a sleeping person is simply present. He turned the lamp back on. The shape was still in the comforter. It had not shifted. The breathing, if he had been hearing breathing, was no longer audible over the lamp's small electrical hum. He got out of bed. He stood in the space between the 2 beds and he looked down at the second bed from directly above. From this angle, the depression was unmistakable. The full topography of a sleeping adult, the relationships between the body's contact points rendered in compressed fabric with the specificity of something that had settled in and was not planning to move. He reached out his hand. He pressed it gently against the comforter where the torso depression was deepest. The fabric compressed slightly further beneath his hand. The resistance of a mattress receiving additional weight added to weight already present. He pulled his hand back. He gathered his bag, his shoes, his phone and charger, his keys. He was in his car and out of the parking lot in under 4 minutes. He drove to the next town and found a diner that was open all night and sat in it with coffee and the fluorescent lights in the presence of other human beings until sunrise. He filed a formal complaint with the motel's management through their website the following week. He described the sound and the comforter depression and the breathing and the resistance under his hand. He described it in clinical, sequential language, the language of a man who has spent his career in detailed documentation for clients and understands that specificity is the difference between a complaint that is taken seriously and one that is not. The chain's customer relations team responded within 48 hours. They thanked him for his feedback and offered him a discount on a future stay. He has not used it. He will not use it. He told me that the television static and the settling noises and the ambient sounds of motel nights at 2 a.m. have never bothered him across 20 years of travel. He is a practical man with a practical relationship to unfamiliar spaces. What he carries from room in that motel in rural Mississippi is not fear of the dark or of strange rooms. What he carries is the breathing. The specific, even untroubled breathing from an empty bed. The breathing of a person who was completely comfortable. Who was not disturbed by his presence. Who was simply asleep in a room they had apparently decided was theirs. He said, "It wasn't threatening. I keep telling myself that and it's true. It wasn't threatening." He was quiet for a moment. But it also wasn't empty. Whatever I was sharing that room with, it had no interest in me. It was just asleep. In its bed. In its room. Another pause. I was the intruder. The Polaroid photographs were in the nightstand drawer, and Megan has wished she had not opened it on every day since she did. She was 31. A travel nurse placed on a 3-month assignment at a regional hospital in northern Arizona, staying at a long-term rate motel approximately 4 miles from the hospital's campus. The rate was reasonable, the location was practical. The room was clean in the functional way of a room that is cleaned regularly and maintained adequately but that no one has invested in aesthetically since its original furnishing. The carpet was an indeterminate color that had been an intentional color once. The curtains blocked the light. The bed was comfortable enough. She had stayed in worse accommodations for longer periods. She had been in the room for 6 weeks when she put her book on the nightstand before sleep and found the drawer slightly ajar and opened it further to push the book inside. The drawer held the usual motel nightstand contents: a small notepad, a pen, a card advertising the property's amenities. She pushed her book in and pushed it to the back of the drawer, and her hand found the false panel at the drawer's rear. The thin backing board that is a standard feature of certain nightstand designs, providing the illusion of the drawer's interior ending at the back while the actual back of the nightstand unit sits an inch or two further. She pressed on it by accident and it gave, and in the gap between the false panel and the nightstand's actual rear wall, she found the photographs. 7 of them. Polaroid format, the specific square aspect ratio of the SX70 and its successors, the characteristic white border, the color palette with its slightly warm cast and the particular grain of the film stock. She estimated from everything she could assess about the physical photographs, the paper stock, the color rendering, the slight chemical fading, that they were from the early to mid-1990s. The photographs showed her room. Not a room with the same floor plan or the same general design. Her room, the specific room she was currently inhabiting, identifiable beyond any reasonable doubt by a constellation of specific imperfections. A water stain on the ceiling above the bed in the shape that she had been looking at for 6 weeks and had started to see a face in, the way the left panel of the window curtain hung approximately 2 inches lower than the right because its mounting bracket was slightly lower, a crack in the bathroom tile she had noticed on her first day and had put in her mental inventory of things to report and then had not reported. These were not generic motel room features. These were the specific, unrepeatable imperfections of this specific room, in photographs that were 30 years old. In each photograph the room was occupied. A woman in each one. She examined them carefully and confirmed that the women were different individuals, different ages, different builds, each one photographed in a different state of the room's occupation. One sleeping, visible from the foot of the bed. One sitting at the small desk by the window, her back to the camera. One standing at the bathroom door, her profile visible. One reading on the bed, face partially visible above the book's cover. One whose position she could not immediately categorize because the photograph's angle was from the ceiling corner of the room looking down, a position that would have required the photographer to be above the room's normal human height. 5 of the 7 photographs were what she would describe as observational. Not staged, not posed, the quality of images taken of a person who is not aware of being photographed and is simply going about the ordinary business of being in a motel room. The 6th photograph was different. A woman sitting up in the bed, facing the camera directly. Fully aware of being photographed. Her expression was not fear. It was resignation. The specific expression of someone who has assessed their situation fully and has understood that understanding it does not change it. A settled, exhausted acceptance. The expression of someone who has been in this situation for long enough to have moved through fear and come out the other side of it into something quieter and heavier. The 7th photograph showed the room empty. Bed made in the tight, institutional configuration. Lights off. Curtains open. The window visible with the parking lot beyond it, captured in the daylight of what appeared to be a morning. And in the parking lot, visible through the window, a figure. Walking away from the building toward the far edge of the lot. The back of a person, no face visible, moving away. Every other figure in all 7 photographs was photographed from the front or the side. This one was photographed from behind. It was the only figure in any of the photographs that could not be identified by its face. Megan called the manager. She showed him the photographs. He looked at them for longer than she expected. Long enough that she understood he was not seeing them for the first time in the sense of encountering something genuinely new. He was seeing them in the sense of recognizing something he had chosen not to look for. He said the photographs could have come from anywhere, from any room. She pointed to the water stain. The curtain. The tile crack visible through the bathroom door in 2 images. She listed the imperfections one by one. He said he would have maintenance look at the room. She went to the police. An officer came to the motel and examined the photographs and wrote a report and submitted the images to a national missing persons database for facial comparison. No matches were found for any of the 5 identifiable faces. The photographs were confirmed as genuine 1990s Polaroid stock. They confirmed nothing else. She completed her assignment. She has kept the photographs in a folder she does not open often. She has thought about the woman with the resigned expression for 3 years. About the moment that expression captures. The specific moment of having understood the full scope of what she was in and choosing, within the constraints of that understanding, how to hold her face. The decision to be calm inside something she could not change. She has thought about who was behind the camera. The figure walking away in the 7th photograph, face never visible across 7 images, who had been in this room with multiple women across the 1990s and had photographed them and had placed the photographs in the gap behind the drawer's false panel before leaving. She has thought about why someone would hide photographs there rather than take them. What the photographs were for to the person who placed them. Whether leaving them was a record for themselves or something intended to be found. Whether the placement behind the false panel, discoverable only by accident by someone reaching too far into the drawer, was a hiding or a waiting. The gap between those 2 things is where she has spent 3 years. She has not arrived at a comfortable position in that gap. The name on the register was the detail that undid everything, and it took Priya 3 days after checking out to understand why it was the detail rather than any of the others. She was 29, a journalist based in Dallas who had been commissioned to write a feature piece on the decline of the American roadside motel for a national magazine. a cultural and economic story about the property type that the interstate highway era had created and that the same forces that had created it were now eliminating. She was a good journalist with a specific talent for finding the human texture inside economic stories, and the assignment suited her. She spent a week driving old U.S. highway routes rather than interstates, stopping at the kinds of motels that the bypass had stranded, staying in them, talking to the people who ran them. The motel outside Amarillo, Texas was a 1960s property with its original signage intact. A neon roadrunner that no longer lit but that retained the formal elegance of mid-century commercial design, the kind of object that had survived long enough to become interesting again. 12 units in a single row facing the highway. A manager named Phil who had been running the property for 22 years and whose father had run it for 18 years before him. Phil was exactly the interview subject the piece required. A man with genuine love for an object that the world was finished with, carrying the specific grief of someone watching a beautiful thing die by degrees. She spent the evening interviewing him at the small table in the office, recording on her phone, taking notes in the notebook she kept for texture and detail that recording didn't capture. He was generous with his time and his history. When she asked to see the original guest registers, he retrieved them without hesitation. Physical ledger books from 1964 forward, 3 decades of handwritten check-ins, the paper record of everyone who had passed through. She sat at the table and photographed pages while Phil talked about the property's plumbing history. She was working systematically through the 1980s volume when she found her name, her full name, in the 1987 register. In October. With a room number, room 9, her current room, and a check-in date written in the practiced shorthand of someone who had filled out many of these entries and had it down to an efficient notation. She was born in 1995. She was looking at her name in a register from 8 years before her birth. She maintained her expression with the specific disciplined neutrality of a journalist who has been trained to receive surprising information without transmitting surprise in a way that closes the source. She photographed the entry. She waited until Phil had moved on to talking about the property's electrical upgrade. She asked, as if it were a natural follow-up to something else he had said, whether she could see the maintenance log from 1987. He found it without difficulty. She located October and found the entry for room 9. Room 9, guest reported. Room cleared. See Phil Sr. She asked what guest reported meant. Phil was quiet for a moment that was specifically different from his previous pauses, not searching for information but deciding how much of the information he had to share. He said that sometimes guests reported seeing someone in their room who wasn't there. Someone who hadn't checked in. He said his father had a protocol for it: go to the room, check it, confirm it empty, settle the guest. He said it happened more than people might expect. He said room 9 was one of the rooms where it happened most. She asked whether the name in the register was actually a guest who had checked in October 1987. Phil pulled the register and looked at the entry for a long time. He said it was not a guest's name. He said it was a notation his father had used when a room generated a guest report and no actual guest could account for what the other guest had looked like. A placeholder, a way of filling the name column when the name of what had been seen was not known. He said his father used a name that came to him when he needed it. He had never explained where the names came from. Her name. In 1987. As a placeholder for an unexplained presence in the room she was currently sleeping in. A presence that had been seen by guests in room 9 often enough to be a known phenomenon. A presence that Phil's father had assigned a rotating series of names to, names that came to him, and one of the names that had come to him for the presence in room 9 in October 1987 was the name of a child who would not exist for another 8 years. She stayed in room 9 that night anyway. She is a journalist and she does not allow a story to tell her where to stand. She slept without incident. She checked out in the morning. The feature piece was published. Room 9 is in it, the history of the property is in it, Phil is in it. Her name in the 1987 register is not in it. She made this editorial decision in the rental car before she left the motel's parking lot and has not reconsidered it. She has the photograph of the register page on her phone. She looks at it occasionally, in the way you look at something that you are not finished understanding. Her name in the column where a guest's name belongs. Written in 1987 by a man who said a name came to him and he wrote it down. A name for something that had been seen in that room by multiple guests across years and that his record-keeping required him to identify. He had written her name 8 years before she existed. She has thought about what that means. Whether it is a coincidence of naming, her parents choosing a name that was simply in circulation and that a motel manager in Texas also had in his vocabulary. Whether it is something that the word coincidence was invented to cover when no better word is available. Whether names, like rooms, sometimes hold something that hasn't arrived yet. She has not arrived at an answer. She has the photograph. Her name in 1987. Waiting for her. The couple in room 7 had checked out at 11 a.m. that morning, the front desk confirmed, and the room had been cleaned and cleared by 1 p.m., and no one had checked into room 7 between 1 p.m. and Ben's arrival at 11 p.m., and the room was nonetheless occupied when he opened the door. He was 41, a long-haul driver for a refrigerated freight company based in Nashville, running a regular route that took him through rural Tennessee on Tuesday and Thursday nights. He had a preferred motel on the route but had called ahead and been told the property was full. A regional event had taken every room within 20 miles. He had taken what was available, confirmed the reservation by phone, gotten a confirmation number. He parked the truck in the motel's oversized lot, where it fit without issue beside 2 other commercial vehicles, and walked to the office and checked in and was given a key card for room 7. He was tired in the specific, deep way of a man who had been driving for 11 hours and who understood that he needed to be horizontal within the next 20 minutes or something in him was going to start making poor decisions. He walked to room 7. He slid the key card through the reader. The light went green. He opened the door. The room was dark except for the television, which was on with its volume low. The ambient glow of a program he couldn't immediately identify casting the room in the shifting blue-gray light of a screen. And in the bed 2 people. He could see them clearly enough in the television's light. 2 forms under the comforter, 1 on each side of the bed, the specific arrangement of a couple who had been sharing a bed long enough to have established their respective territories and who were currently occupying them in untroubled sleep. He said sorry and closed the door. He went back to the front desk and told the clerk, the young woman who had checked him in, that there were people in his room. She looked at her system and told him what her system said. Room 7 checked out at 11 a.m., cleaned at 1 p.m., no subsequent check-in. She said it with the professional confidence of someone for whom the system's information was authoritative. He said there were 2 people in the bed. She came with him. She knocked. No response. She used the master key. The room was empty. The television was off. The bed was made in the tight, flat, standard configuration of freshly cleaned motel linen, the kind of hospital corner precision that housekeeping produces and guests never replicate. The room had the specific quality of a recently prepared space, clean, arranged, unoccupied. She looked at him. He looked at the room. He asked how long the walk from the desk to the room took. She said 2 minutes. He said, 2 minutes to get out of bed, make it to housekeeping standard, turn off the television, and leave through a door that was still locked when you used the master key. She had no answer for this. Her system said the room was empty. The room appeared empty. She could not account for what had been in it 2 minutes earlier. He took the room. He was 10 hours deep into a day that had started before dawn, and the next available property was 40 miles further, and he had made the calculation and accepted the room. He locked the door. He engaged the deadbolt and the chain. He did not turn on the television. He got into the bed and lay in the dark with the specific wakefulness of someone who has decided to sleep and cannot make their body comply. At 1:30 a.m., the television turned on. He was standing on the floor before the decision had fully formed, the specific, adrenaline-loaded waking of a person startled from the edge of sleep. He stood in the room's center looking at the television, which had turned on to a channel he didn't recognize, some kind of late-night programming, the volume at the same low level he had observed when he opened the door at 11 p.m. He turned it off with the remote. He lay back down. At 2:15 a.m., the television turned on again. Same channel. Same volume. He unplugged it from the wall. He pulled the power cord out and left it trailing on the floor where he could see it, and he went back to bed. At 3:40 a.m., the sound of the television woke him. The power cord was where he had left it. Unplugged from the wall socket, the plug visible on the floor. The television was on. The same channel. The same volume. He checked out at 4 a.m. He drove the 40 miles to the next property and slept until the alarm he had set, and woke with the specific, groggy heaviness of insufficient sleep and made his delivery. He told me that the television, unplugged and running, is something he has never found an explanation for that satisfies him. He has thought about surge capacity and residual charge and broadcast signal interference and every technical explanation that a person could apply to a television that operates without power. None of them hold under examination. But it is not what he returns to. What he returns to is the couple in the bed when he opened the door at 11 p.m. The two shapes under the comforter in the television's light, motionless, at ease, occupying the room with the complete naturalness of people who had every right to be there. He has thought about the bed, the tight, flat, housekeeping standard bed he found 2 minutes later. He has thought about who makes a bed that way. Yes, don't. Housekeeping does. Whatever was in that bed had made it in the time it took a front desk clerk to walk from the office to room 7, and had made it correctly, in the precise institutional manner of someone who has been doing it for years. The level of practice in that implies duration. Whatever occupied room 7 had been doing this for a very long time. Had been in that room long enough to know how the beds were made. Had made the bed before when interrupted. Had done it enough times to do it quickly and correctly. He has not driven that route since his company reassigned it. He requested the reassignment. He cited scheduling. He has never told his dispatcher the real reason. The guest log from 1993 was in a storage box that the current owner of the motel had kept because throwing away historical records seemed wrong, even when the records were from a property he had bought at a price that reflected its complications. And the margin note on the October page was 3 words in a handwriting that no one had ever been able to source. Dana was 37, an independent true crime researcher who had been running a podcast for 4 years covering cold cases in the American South, and the case of the woman who had disappeared from this motel in a small Tennessee town in 1993 was one she had been working on for 2 of those years. The woman had checked in on a Friday, paid cash for 1 night, and had not checked out on Saturday morning. Her car had been in the lot. Her bag had been in the room. She had not been found. The case had been investigated, had run out of leads, and had been technically open and practically abandoned for 30 years. Dana had come to the motel to document the property for an episode, to provide her listeners with the physical context of the case, the specific geography of where someone had last been seen. The current owner, Greg, had bought the property 8 years ago knowing about the 1993 case and had made his peace with it in the specific way of a pragmatic businessman who understood that the history was part of what had made the purchase price achievable. He had kept the original records from the previous ownership in a storage room off the main office. Boxes of guest logs, maintenance records, supplier invoices, the paper archaeology of a motel's operational history. He gave Dana access without hesitation, and she photographed everything relevant. On the October 1993 page of the guest log, in the margin beside the entry for the night of the disappearance, in handwriting that was demonstrably different from the register's regular check-in entries, a different pen, a different hand, a different pressure of inscription, 3 words. She didn't leave. Dana asked Greg about the note. He had noticed it years ago. He had asked the one employee he had inherited from the previous ownership, a maintenance man who had worked the property since the late 1990s, and the man had told him the note had been there when he started, that he didn't know who wrote it and had never asked. She compared the handwriting against every other handwritten element in the available records. It matched nothing. Different from the check-in entries, different from the maintenance logs, different from the supplier correspondence. An unknown hand, writing 3 words in the margin of a register beside the entry for the night a woman disappeared. She didn't leave. Not she was taken. Not something happened to her. Not even she is gone. The specific, present tense construction of someone making an observation about a current state. She didn't leave. She is still here. She has not gone. Dana asked about room 11, the room the woman had been assigned to. She asked whether it was available. She asked to stay in it. The first night was unremarkable in the way that attentive people experience unremarkable nights when they are watching carefully for something that does not choose to be found that night. Dana was awake most of it, documenting the ambient sounds of the room, noting the view from the window, recording her observations in the systematic way of someone who has learned that the detail you dismiss as irrelevant is often the detail that matters later. Nothing happened. The room was a room. Its walls held their silence. The second night at 3:20 a.m., 3 knocks on the connecting door. Room 11 connected to room 12. Greg had confirmed room 12 was unoccupied. The connecting door was locked on both sides. She had tested it herself on the first night, pulling the handle and finding it solid. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, with the deliberateness of someone who has decided to knock and is knocking with intention. She did not open the door. She activated the recording function on her phone and held it toward the door and asked whether someone was there. No response. She asked again. From the other side of the door, in the silence after her second question, a sound began. Faint, at the outer edge of audible, the kind of sound that the recording would capture better than the ear because the ear discards sounds it does not understand. The sound of someone crying. Not the acute, active weeping of fresh grief. The quiet, exhausted, worn-down crying of someone who has been sad for a very long time and has run out of the energy that active grief requires and is left with only the residue of it. Small, sustained, completely human in its quality. It lasted 40 seconds. Then it stopped. Clean ending, not a fade. She checked room 12 in the morning. Greg confirmed no occupancy. The room was undisturbed. The recording holds the knocking clearly, 3 knocks, even spacing, deliberate cadence. What follows on the recording she plays at reduced volume because at normal volume it is more present than she is comfortable with in most listening contexts. The sound is there. It is unidentified. Every person she has played it for has identified it the same way she did. Her episode on the 1993 case is her most listened to. The recording is in it. The response to it constitutes some of her most significant listener correspondence. She thinks about the margin note with the consistency of someone returning to a problem they have not solved. She didn't leave. Written by someone who knew. Who had been in that room or near that room and had observed what the investigation had not observed and had recorded the observation in the most available space. The margin of the register beside the entry for the night in question. Not she was taken. Not she is gone. She didn't leave. The active negative. The observation that the departure had not occurred. The persistence, in that room, of a presence that had checked in and had not checked out. Dana leaves the connecting door in every motel room she stays in now locked and does not acknowledge it. She does not knock. She does not ask what is on the other side. She has decided that some doors are better left as doors. The last account belongs to a woman named Ruth, and I am telling it last because it is the account that comes closest to answering what the opening of this video actually asked. Not who is in the room, but what being in the room means to whatever stays. What the occupation is for. What it is like to be the kind of presence that a motel room holds. Ruth was 63, a retired high school science teacher from Columbus, Ohio who had developed, in the first years of her retirement, the practice of a solo road trip every October. 1 week, driving old routes rather than highways, stopping at the kinds of motels and diners that the highway era had stranded along state roads that bypasses had drained of their original traffic. She was not doing this for nostalgia. She was not a sentimental person. She was doing it for the quality of the experience, which she had determined through trial, and a second trial was exactly the quality of experience she wanted to have in October. Movement. Quiet. The specific pleasure of a person who has spent 30 years in a building full of children and noise discovering, in retirement, what genuine solitude feels like. She was not credulous. She was not fearful. She was a former science teacher who had spent her career teaching young people to apply evidence to claims and to distinguish between what they knew, what they suspected, and what they wished were true. She applied this standard to herself with the same rigor she had applied it to her students. The motel was in rural Georgia, near the border of two counties in an area that the highway had bypassed in the early 1980s and that had maintained a specific quality of rural stasis since then. She had stayed here on her second annual trip and her fourth. She had a particular attachment to the room at the end of the row, room 12, whose window faced east across a field and whose morning light in October was, she had decided after her second visit, as fine a thing as she had found in her travels. She checked in on a Tuesday evening in October, her sixth annual trip. She ate at the diner across the road, the kind of diner whose menu had not changed significantly since 1975 and whose pie was extraordinary. She came back, read for an hour in the chair by the window, turned off the light and went to sleep. She woke at some unmarked hour of the deep night. She did not look at the clock, a deliberate practice she had developed on these trips, the relinquishment of time as an organizing principle in the hours of sleep, the decision to be in the dark rather than in a scheduled relationship with it. She woke and she lay still and she became aware, without alarm and without explanation, that the chair by the window was occupied. She could see it in the ambient light that came through the curtains from the field, the faint, sourceless light of an overcast October night in rural Georgia that was just enough to show her the window and the chair in front of it. Someone was in the chair. An older woman. She could make out the profile. Sitting with the complete ease of someone in their own place, with no posture of alertness or attention toward the room's other occupant. Looking at the window. At the field beyond it. Ruth lay still for a moment. She was, by her own account, not afraid. She was a scientist in the presence of data. She asked quietly who was there. No answer. She asked whether the figure needed anything. No answer. The figure sat and looked at the window and did not respond. Ruth sat up in bed. She reached for the nightstand lamp and turned it on. The chair was empty. She turned the lamp off. The figure was in the chair. She did this 3 times with the methodical patience of a person running a controlled test, allowing sufficient time between repetitions for her eyes to fully adjust. Lamp on, the chair was empty, the window visible, the field beyond it dark. Lamp off, the chair was occupied, the older woman's profile against the window, her attention on the field. On the third cycle, with the lamp off and her eyes as fully adjusted as they would get, Ruth looked at the figure for a long time. An older woman. Sitting with the absolute comfort of someone in a space that belongs to them completely. Not performing any action. Not communicating. Simply present in the way that a person is simply present in their own home when they are doing nothing in particular and require nothing from anyone. Ruth said, "I'll leave the light off. You can stay." She turned over and went to sleep. In the morning she spoke to the motel's owner, a woman named Carol who had been running the property for 30 years. Carol listened to Ruth's account with the specific quality of someone receiving familiar information, not bored by it, not dismissive of it, but not encountering it for the first time either. She said, "That's Margaret. She owned this property before me. She passed away in 1989. Room 12 was her room. She lived in it for the last 5 years of her life, after her husband died, and she had nowhere else that felt like home." Ruth asked whether other guests had seen her. Carol said some had. She said most of them were frightened. Most of them moved rooms or left the property. Ruth said she had not been frightened. Carol looked at her for a moment with an expression that Ruth has described as the expression of someone recognizing something they had been hoping to see. She said, "I know. Margaret doesn't come to everyone. Only certain guests. I've come to think she has a sense for the ones who won't be afraid of her." Ruth asked what Margaret had been doing in the chair. Carol said, "What she always did when she was alive. She'd sit in that chair in the evenings and look at the field. She said the October light on it in the morning was the best light she knew. She said being able to look at it before sleep helped her. I think she's still looking at it." Ruth has stayed in room 12 every October for 5 more years since that conversation. She has seen Margaret on 3 of those 5 subsequent visits. Always in the chair, always oriented toward the window, always visible when the lamp is off and invisible when it is on. She does not speak to her. Margaret does not speak to her. They share the room in the comfortable silence of 2 people who have each made a decision about the other's presence and are at peace with it. Ruth brings 2 cups of tea in the evenings now. She puts one on the table beside the chair before she gets into bed. In the morning, the cup on the table is cold. Not room temperature cool, cold, in the specific way of liquid that has been sitting for hours. She does not know whether Margaret drinks the tea. She does not ask. She makes it and puts it there because it is the gesture available to her, and she has decided that gestures, offered with genuine intention, have value regardless of whether they can be verified as received. She told me that the way she thinks about motel rooms has been changed permanently by room 12 and by Margaret. She used to think of them as anonymous spaces, temporary, identityless, existing only in the functional present of the traveler who currently occupied them. She said, "Every room has held people. More people than you can count, across however many years the room has been there. Some of them held on to the room the way people hold on to things they love. And the rooms held back. The rooms remember." She paused. "When you check in, you're not the first and you're not the last. You're the one who's there tonight. The room has been there before you and it will be there after you, and some of what it has held has never quite left." She paused again. Margaret loved that field. She loved that specific light in October. She is still in the chair looking at it. I find that to be entirely reasonable. I find it to be something I understand. She finished her tea. "I hope someone makes me tea after I am gone." 8 rooms. 8 nights. 8 accounts from people who found that the history of a motel room does not clear itself when the last guest checks out. That the 40 or 50 or 60 years of human presence compressed into the walls and the carpet and the bed springs and the specific acoustic of a space that has absorbed decades of human sound, all of it persists. It has nowhere else to be. A woman who arranged a sleeping traveler's possessions with intimate, unsettling care. 217 dates scratched behind a headboard by something that had been keeping its record for 40 years and was still keeping it. A sleeping form in a second bed that breathed in the dark and accepted a stranger's hand on its comforter without stirring. 7 Polaroid photographs hidden for someone to find by accident, bearing the faces of women who may or may not have left the room they were photographed in. A name written as a placeholder in 1987 for a child who would not exist for another 8 years. 2 shapes in a bed made with housekeeping precision in 2 minutes and a television that ran without power. 3 knocks on a connecting door and the sound of someone who had been sad for 30 years. And an old woman in a chair who loved the October light on a field and has been watching it since 1989 and accepts a cup of tea that is cold in the morning. What these 8 accounts share is what all motel rooms share. They are the spaces between other spaces. The rooms that people occupy not as a destination but as a pause between 2 other places. And because they are pauses, because the people who stay in them are always in transit, the rooms accumulate without ever being fully claimed. No one owns them. No one's life is organized around them. They are held in common by everyone who has ever slept in them. And some of what they hold in common has decided to remain. You check in. You put your bag down. You turn off the light. And in the dark, you become the latest in a sequence that was running before you arrived and will continue after you leave. Whatever was in the room before you is still there. It is simply waiting for the light to go out. To share the room the way rooms have always been shared. With everyone who ever needed one. With everyone who ever decided to stay. If this unsettled you, you're not alone.